Welcome back to my channel. My name is Matt Gilman. I'm the blind bike trials rider. That's right, I'm blind and I ride bike trials. A lot of people have asked how I ride a bike the way I do, and a lot of it's experience over time and learned different techniques that work for me that don't necessarily work for others. But I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a rundown of how I lost my sight and how I got back on the bike. It all began back in 2004 at the age of 24. I was working on cars at the time and I noticed things were getting a little fuzzy to see. So I make an appointment to go see an ophthalmologist thinking I just needed glasses. They tell me after looking in my eyes that it was much more serious than that. And they said I needed to go see a retina specialist like ASAP. So I made an appointment after a bunch of tests. Told me I had the worst case of diabetic retinopathy he'd ever seen. I had 22 eye surgeries, and with all those surgeries, there was a lot of trauma that went on with my eyes. Essentially, where I stand today is out of my left eye is completely dark. I had a detached retina where I can't see anything at all. I can't see even my hand movement. My right eye, I can't see most things. Out of the top right corner though, I can see light and some movement. So like my hand, I can't see moving in front of my face, but if I move it over here, I can see a little bit of movement, which doesn't really help for riding. So straight on, I don't see very well. In my first video that I put out back in 2008, right after I could get back on my bike, I said I could see 3 feet in front of my face and see some objects. That is no longer the case. Over time, this vision out of my right eye has gotten so much worse than it used to be. But I've learned how to ride in such a way where I'm not so reliant on seeing the objects. A lot of the things that I do on my bike is reliant on just my visualization in my head, but a lot of it has to do with the tire. So let me start by showing you how I got back on the bike, and we'll go through some of the processes of how I ride. I was sitting on my bike in my basement one day and just kind of going through the motions, closing my eyes and going, man, I wish I could jump and do all this stuff. So I was like, you know what, why can't I? I'll just grab my bike and go out front of my house to my curb. And I figured if I find the curb, I can jump on and off a curb easily. But I quickly found out that that wasn't the case. Even though I could see a little better than I can today, it was really hard to find the curb, first of all, with the bike once I was here. But the harder part was just the basic simple track stand, which is just sitting there and doing this on a bike without sight, was really hard for me. So the best way I can describe it is, and I've used to do this at school shows all the time, I would have all the kids stand up in a safe environment, stand on one foot with your eyes closed and see how long you can balance there. And that's track standing without sight. I thought I would never be able to get a track stand. I just kept trying over and over, and I just kept falling off, and my balance was so shaky. I just kept falling off, and I just was like, oh my gosh, I'll never get this. And I was like, you know what? This is hopeless. I'll never be able to ride a bike again. I'm just going to put it away and give up. And I got really depressed, and I'm a problem solver. So I was trying to figure a workaround and figure out how I could do this without going out front to the curb. So what I ended up doing was getting into my living room, which I don't suggest people do, is I was like, I'm just going to sit here and figure it out. So I just started and doing this, and a lot of just moving around, trying to get comfortable, and a lot of on and off the bike until I started kind of figuring it out and started sitting here like this. And after doing that in my living room for a bunch of times, I started getting really good at it. And then I took my bike outside. And once I came outside, then I found the curb. Then it was trying to figure out, how do I know where the curb's at? Because if I'm touching the curb, I know where the curb's at, like this. that's easy. But once you're here, where's the curb? And when you can't see it, that's a whole new ball game. A lot of that was me trying to figure out, all right, so if I'm here at the curb and I'm track standing and I move here, now I've moved to the left, but how far to the left have I moved from the curb? Because now I'm not square to it, I'm pretty far off. And what I had to learn was to keep my eyes focused on a point, whether I'm looking at something or not. Even though I can't see it, I just needed to focus and not move my head, just keep my head pointed at one thing. So that way, if I move this way, now I know I can come back here and I'm good and square to it. So then that was spatially figuring out where I was, so that way I can go on the curb. So I had to learn how to kind of feel timing, and the way I feel that is I've learned how much of a role. So if I always touch something, I put a foot on it to make sure I'm square and whatnot, or a hand. But if you ever watch me ride, I'll touch it and then roll back, so I know how far back something is. So when I jump, I can get right to the corner. But that was a learned spatial thing that took a while for me to figure out. Like, it was not a quick, easy thing. And I'm still kind of working on it, especially when I do gaps. But when I ended up at a ledge, that's where everything got a little bit crazier. So I got a ledge right over here, so let's move over there and show you a little bit of the next level of challenge that I faced. All right, so we're at the ledge that was right across the street, and this is a little almost wheel high size ledge. So this was a good starting point for me when I started getting back on my bike. I started getting comfortable with just getting up the ledge like this and feeling like, ooh, this is scary, because it was already tall and scarier than a curb. And not being able to see the first time, this was one of the scariest things ever. And then just getting comfortable with that movement was big. But then eventually I started figuring out, like, all right, I'm on the edge here. How can I get my back wheel to where my front wheel is without going too far? Because I didn't want to overkick and land and loop out and fall backwards and land on the ground. I wanted to be able to just move my bike enough to get my back wheel from back here to where my front wheel was. And that was a huge thing to learn, figuring out how to put the right amount of pedal pressure to do this. And that was a lot of practicing in an empty parking lot like this, just sitting here and just going, all right, back wheel where the front wheel is, like that, just trying to figure out slowly how far, trying to figure out how much pressure to put on that, to give that kick, just to put wheels right where I want them every time. I can do it every time. And once I can figure that out, then dropping off stuff was easy. It's a little scary the higher you get, because in the back of your mind, you're always afraid that you're going to fall off the edge and loop out, especially when you don't know where the edge is. It's a little scary. The things that I've noticed that I do is when I'm kicking and I get to the rear wheel, I try to get to the edge here, but that doesn't always work for me. So I end up landing in here somewhere and hopping off, which doesn't look the cleanest, but to sit there and do little hops to get to the edge is a little bit scary for me. So I generally don't do that. When I go off of stuff, wherever my back wheel lands is where I kick from. And I try to get close to the edge as much as I can, but it doesn't always work. But because I've got the pedal pressure kind of figured out, it works pretty well. I get pretty close to the edge. And that's how I ride my bike as a blind guy. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and please share. Let the world know what's possible. If I'm doing this as a blind guy, you have no excuse of any obstacles that stand in your way. Anything in the world is possible if you put your mind to it. And this is a passion of mine, and I'm a bike mechanic, and I love bikes, and this is why I do it, because I don't want to do anything more than ride bikes for as long as I can. And doing it this way, even though I'm the only one in the world, I wouldn't have it any other way. So, till next time, I appreciate it. Thank you.